at the end, I was asking about the movie, and I asked him about that one particular part where everybody's talking, and they all cried out Epstein Island. And I went, oh, okay. Now I understand what we're up against.
Wow.
Epstein Island isn't the only island out there.
Some things once heard can never be unheard. Jim Caviezel has spent years music trying to tell you something. He's been called a conspiracy theorist. He's been blacklisted. He's even been mocked by late-night music hosts who should have been listening, instead of laughing. His film Sound of Freedom exposed music, the reality of child trafficking, but it was buried by the industry and dismissed by the very people who claim to care music about children. But Caviezel didn't stop. He kept speaking, and now, music, he's revealing something even darker. Jim is now alleging he begged Ellen DeGeneres to music, help save the kids on Epstein Island. He says he reached out directly to her and pleaded with her to use music, her platform, to speak out and do something, but she never did. Now Caviezel Music is naming names and exposing the network, laying out the connections between Hollywood's elite and the island that was supposed music to stay hidden. Today we examine Jim Caviezel's warnings, his desperate plea to Ellen DeGeneres, and the question music that haunts everything. Who else knew and who chose to stay silent?
The Ellen situation.
Yeah.
You know, people found out that Ellen was mean, and all these people came out and said, Ellen, actually. And they were like, oh,
Yeah.
I can't believe it. And she lost everything. She fell apart, disappeared, because people found out that this character that she was portraying in a half an hour on a television show is not really who she was.
I brought this up a few years ago, and all of a sudden I was attacked by every media. Look it up. It's there.
Not so long ago, Jim Caviezel was at the peak of his career. He had everything Hollywood could offer: fame, money, music, prestige. He could have stayed comfortable, and just like many others, he could have kept his mouth shut and collected his checks. Instead, he walked away. He made Sound of Freedom, a film based on the true story of Tim Ballard, a former government agent who risked everything to rescue children from networks in Latin America and beyond. During filming in Colombia, Caviezel and his crew witnessed something no actor should ever see: children being sold music in broad daylight like merchandise, like they were nothing. He said later that what he filmed was fiction, music, but what we saw was real. He brought the film back to Hollywood expecting a celebration, expecting the industry that built him to stand behind a movie about saving children. Instead, he was blacklisted.
They're created out of fear, and with something like Sound of Freedom, it specifically is looking at QAnon concepts of these child rings that are run by the high-level elites.
For some reason, the entire media is smearing this movie as a dangerous conspiracy theory. The press is saying that the star, Jim Caviezel, is a QAnon guy. And Jim plays Tim Ballard, which is strange because just a few years ago, the same media was celebrating Tim Ballard's heroics. So why is the media warning people not to see a movie about child that's based on a true story?
Major studios and networks were under pressure from powerful figures to boycott the movie. They were warned not to touch that film or their careers would be over.
I was not emotionally prepared for the new film, Sound of Freedom. You've heard it referred to as a right-wing film, as a Christian film, as a conspiracy movie, as a QAnon film. You know, they use all the buzzwords to make this film as radioactive as possible.
Sound of Freedom, it specifically is looking at QAnon concepts of these child rings that are run by the high-level elites. Now, it's not true.
The movie highlights the very real, not conspiracy theory of human. Need I remind you of another thing that was considered a conspiracy theory up until 5 seconds ago, which was the fact that a little guy named Jeffrey Epstein had a little island where the most powerful people, the tippity top of government officials, celebrity, Hollywood, would go?
Now, why would an industry bury a film about saving children? Why would powerful people work so hard to silence a story that should have been celebrated? Then the Epstein documents were unsealed and the public expected to find a few familiar names. Politicians, financiers, the usual suspects. What they found was something else entirely. A list of names that stretched across industries. People who attended his parties. People who flew on his plane. People who visited his island. And one name that stood out to everyone who had been watching Caviezel's battle: Ellen DeGeneres. Her name appeared repeatedly on the list, and not just in passing, either, but in context that made people stop and ask, what did she know? Ellen DeGeneres' name appeared in the files in a 2014 email about meeting schedules. Nothing incriminating as such, but for those who had been following Jim Caviezel's warnings, it was enough to wonder how she fit into Epstein's world. Caviezel claims he reached out to her directly and begged her to use her platform to speak out about the children on Epstein Island, but she never did. There is also another name that haunts this story, one that connects Ellen DeGeneres to a tragedy that, for some, has never quite been explained. In August 2022, Anne Heche died in a fiery car crash in Los Angeles. She drove into a home and the resulting fire took her life. The official ruling was that it was accidental, but online, whispers have persisted. Some point to Anne's history of speaking out about dark forces in Hollywood. Others note the timing, just as the Epstein revelations were gaining momentum. Unconfirmed reports suggest Anne had been working on a documentary exposing child networks. A project called Children of the Machine. Whether it existed, whether it was real, may never be known. What is known is this. Anna Heche spent years trying to process and articulate experiences during her time with Ellen that she said were too disturbing to speak aloud. And then suddenly she was gone. Sources close to Anne, unnamed and unverified, have whispered that her death was not an accident, that she knew too much, that she was silenced before she could speak. There is no proof. There may never be. But in a story filled with powerful people, sealed documents, and unexplained deaths, Anne Heche's name lingers like a question no one wants to answer. But Ellen wasn't the only one. Oprah Winfrey's name appeared over 5 times in the Epstein files. In deposition transcripts, Oprah testified that she barely knew Epstein, but her connections to other controversial figures have drawn scrutiny. She was a vocal supporter of John of God, a Brazilian spiritual healer, later convicted of music, sentenced to nearly 400 years in prison. She had praised him, featured him on her show, and believed in him.
This is an interview I wasn't sure would ever happen. One of the most famous spiritual healers in the world rarely talks to anyone on camera. John of God agreed to sit down with me under a mango tree on the grounds of the casa. A group of his patients gathered to watch. John of God speaks only Portuguese, so Heather Cumming helped translate. Ready, guys? You describe yourself as a spiritual medium. What does that mean, a medium?
In 2007, Oprah opened a school for underprivileged girls in South Africa. Soon after, a dormitory matron was accused of Oprah handled it publicly, testified before Congress, and settled quietly.
The school.
But it's not just Epstein that Oprah has ties to. She has been photographed with Harvey Weinstein for years. She attended his parties and she smiled for his cameras. Never spoke out against him until after the world did. Jim Caviezel has used a specific word to describe figures like Oprah, gatekeepers. People who lend their influence, their credibility, their platforms to systems that exploit the vulnerable, whether they know it or not. None of this is proof of wrongdoing. Ellen has not been charged. Oprah has not been accused of crimes, but the connections exist. The questions remain and the silence from the most powerful voices in media speaks louder than any denial. Now, Jeffrey Epstein died in federal custody in August 2019. The official ruling was died, but for millions of people, that word has never sat right. The cameras conveniently malfunctioned that night, and the guards who were supposed to watch him also slept through the whole thing. Not only that, the investigation was rushed. The surveillance footage that should have shown everything was conveniently unavailable. And with Epstein's death, the public lost the chance to hear directly from the man at the center of it all. Since then, documents have trickled out. Names have appeared, but the full truth, the complete picture of who knew what, who went where, who participated, remains buried under layers of legal secrecy and media silence. Every release is redacted, every file is incomplete. The people whose names appear in those files haven't disappeared. They're still here, still working, still smiling on red carpets and accepting awards. The machinery of protection money, lawyers, and media connections keeps them safe while the public waits for accountability that never comes. Jim Caviezel has spoken about this for years. He doesn't just see a scandal. He sees a system, a network so deeply embedded that exposing it feels impossible. He's been blacklisted, mocked, dismissed, but he keeps speaking. There is an event coming, a divine music reckoning. And when it happens, the walls will fall. Behind the names and the redacted documents, there is a reality too many people want to ignore. Over 300,000 children, under 18, have been in the United States alone. That's not a statistic, that's a stadium full of children. Approximately 85,000 children who crossed the southern border have disappeared without a trace, just gone, vanished into a system that was supposed to protect them. Despite the risks, despite the threats, despite watching others fall silent, whistleblowers continue to music come forward. They speak at great personal cost, knowing that others before them have faced consequences they couldn't escape. They speak because the alternative, saying nothing, is worse. Anna Heche is also gone. She died in a car crash in 2022 under circumstances that for many have never been fully explained. Those close to her believe she knew things, had seen things, was preparing to speak about things, and then suddenly she wasn't there anymore. Epstein is gone too, and with him the full extent of what he knew died as well. Conveniently, completely, permanently. The secrecy continues, the protection of elites continues. The system that allowed Epstein to operate for decades continues to function exactly as it was designed. But the children are still waiting. The survivors are still speaking. The truth is still trying to break through. Jim Caviezel says a reckoning is coming, that there will be an event, a moment when the walls fall and the music truth can no longer be contained. He points to whistleblowers, to sealed documents about to be released, to a shift he feels happening beneath the surface. Is he right, or is this just another story that will be buried? Another set of names that will stay redacted? Another round of promises that accountability is just around the corner? The island is still there, the files are still sealed, the powerful are still protected, but the questions still remain. So let me know what you think about this whole drama in the comments. Till next time.